COVID-19 cases are surging across the US, so how will that affect the White House's push to reopen schools?
Well, let's look at the first part of that question. So I think it'll help us answer the second part. Let's just get our heads around the nature of this spike. 68,000 Americans are contracting the coronavirus every day at the moment. In our 50 American states, coronavirus infections are rising in 33 of those states. 14 of those states consider themselves lucky because their rates of infection are not going down, but they're holding steady. So that brings us to a total of 3.2 million Americans who have the coronavirus. 135,118 Americans have died from COVID as of half an hour ago. So with all that in mind comes the next big question of when do we open the schools? Now, the American school year is due to begin soon in September. Now, the White House is pushing hard for those schools to open on time in September, no matter what. From the president to the vice president, they've been very clear. And in fact, this morning on the Sunday morning talk shows, the education secretary was out there and she was saying the rule should be that these kids should be back at school in the fall. The rule. Now, to get these kids back to school, the schools have to prepare. Now, the Centre for Disease Control has issued a series of guidelines of ways to possibly make schools safe, but they're only guidelines, they're not mandatory, and they don't necessarily have to be applied nationally. So school systems are not receiving national leadership on how they're supposed to reopen. And in fact, there was one school superintendent from Virginia who said, keep kids 6 feet apart. Right now, our average between desks is 18 inches apart. He said, I cover schools that if you add them all up, they're the size of the Pentagon. I'd have to build 5 Pentagons to fit the current guidelines. It would cost billions of dollars for the schools to meet the proper guidelines. No one's got the billions, and the guidelines have certainly not been made clear.
Michael, we've got about a minute left, but interesting pictures out of the US. Donald Trump, well, he's finally bowed to pressure and he's whacked that mask on his face.
Right. Well, as we've discussed before, for some bizarre reason, the coronavirus has become a political football here in America between Republicans and Democrats. It's become part of the culture wars. If you wear a mask, you've got to be a bleeding heart liberal. If you don't, you've got to be a freedom-loving American. Well, for the first time, the president wore a mask when he visited soldiers at Walter Reed Hospital. Well, I can tell you now, put it this way, this morning on the morning shows, this is what the Surgeon General had to say about wearing masks.
The disease course is about 2 to 3 weeks. So just as we've seen cases skyrocket, we can turn this thing around in 2 to 3 weeks if we can get a critical mass of people wearing face coverings, practicing at least 6 feet of social distancing, doing the things that we know are effective.
So he's talking about making things effective, yet it seems to be more about something political or ideological. Quite frankly, mate, I just don't understand it.
Okay, Michael Ware, we'll talk to you again Wednesday. Thanks for joining us.